welcome. So my first question is with reference to the project that you were discussing. So I just want to know if the data was imbalanced or balanced.
Thank you, Nitin. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity, Nitin. The project that I worked on, just to give a quick gist on or the recap of the work that we have done, is basically to predict the cost of a vehicle. So the business wanted to have an appropriate cost for the second sales of the car. But in order to do that, we did not have any labeled data. So we thought of creating a correlation between the mileage of the vehicle and then map that to the cost of the vehicle. So this mapping is obviously done by the clients themselves based on a subjective decision and experience they have taken. But to come to that area, we have predicted the mileage of the vehicle. That is like performance of the vehicle. To work on this particular use case, we had the sample data. We took close to 2,500 records, and we had around 10 columns. And the output column that we were working on was a continuous variable, that is the mileage per gallon. And when we verified the distribution of this particular continuous variable, it was observed that this is non-normal. We had a few exceptional cases, and we had to deal with those exceptional cases, and we tried to analyze the normality of the data. And because it was not normal, we couldn't work with random sampling techniques. We had to first treat this, ensure that it was converted to make it normal by using various transformation techniques. We did try manual transformation techniques, and we also tried Johnson technique and Box-Cox techniques as well to be very sure that the outcome that we are getting, the data that we were receiving after transformation was very, very perfect with respect to the scope of that work that we were doing. And once it was normally distributed, the transformed data, we used that, which basically was giving us a balanced data split. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharath. Yeah, that's a pretty detailed answer. So Barney, in the context of your project, would you like to elaborate further or add on to what Sharath has already said?
Yeah, absolutely, Nitin. So our project that we have worked upon was to predict whether a person will default on the loan or not. That's loan defaulter prediction model. So the output variable that we were dealing with had two categories: default, not default. And when we looked at the split, proportion of default and proportion of not default, we figured out that 90% of the people were falling into the category of not default, and 10% of the people were falling into the category of default. And going by the thumb rule, if we have one of these classes, that is default or not default, if we have one of these two classes having less than 30% entries, then this data set would be called as imbalanced data set. And very clearly, since one of the classes, the default classes, were approximately 10% of the entire data set, our data set was classified, or we categorized this as imbalanced data set. And then we have applied imbalance techniques on this data set. So when we moved on to the model building phase, if it was balanced, we would have done a split as training and test using a random sampling technique. But for us, since the underlying data was imbalanced, we have applied techniques such as SMOT, modified SMOT. We tried out undersampling, oversampling, k-fold cross-validation, and bunch of techniques which should ideally be applied when it comes to imbalanced datasets. Yep. Thank you so much, Nitin.